Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Power Law Investor. Today is December 23rd, 2024, a Monday, and this is week 19, and I'll be providing an update on how DCAing using the Power Law is coming along and talk specifically about what's going on in the world of Kaspa. So, as always, this is not financial advice, it's just for informational purposes only. So, today Bitcoin is trading little bit above 95,000, and Kaspa is trading slightly below 12 cents. So, we have seen quite a bit of change since the last time we had the update. And Bitcoin was trading in the above 104, 105 range, which was about almost 2 weeks ago was my last update. We were bouncing up quite high, and then we have now about a week ago, and then we have dropped down quite significantly since then to about 95. And similarly, if we look at Caspa, we've had percentage-wise even bigger change. So we were up around the 18 cents region about 2 weeks ago, and then we've had a steady decline and all the way around in the 12-cent zone right now. So quite a big change. We dropped down by almost 33%. And throughout the time, we've been investing in both Bitcoin and Kaspa. Now, to quickly summarize what is the Power Law simply states that in the log space, we have a straight line relationship between time and price. And when we take that and extrapolate that onto the linear plane, we end up with a curved line. And if the future is like the past and this straight line tendency continues, we can make estimates on what sort of returns we can expect. So for Bitcoin, based on the current price, we're looking at a price in a year's time of about 142K, representing a return of about 50%. And with Caspa, we are looking at an expected price in about a year's time for about 75 cents, giving about a 538% return, which is quite fantastic. And through this power law, every day we invest $100 in according to an algorithm, uh, which splits it to 20% cash and splits a distribution between Caspa and Bitcoin based on both the expected returns and how confident we are in the returns. The history for Bitcoin is a lot bigger than Caspa, almost 15 years at this point. Whereas for Caspa, we've got a little under 3 years of history at this point. And so the reliability in Caspa is much less, even though the gradient or the expected returns are much higher. Right? So that's kind of how it works. And following this power law, we've been investing regularly. We started off at $20,000 and are down to $7,400. And to continue this experiment, I might add another 10K when the 7,400 runs out. But where we are currently is based on current prices, an overall return of minus 5%. We've spent about $10,000 in Caspa so far and two and a quarter thousand dollars on Bitcoin. Average Bitcoin price is 68K and average CAS price is about 14K. And outside of the DCA, we've also taken advantage of pushing in lump sums at particular price points. And that has resulted in us having a lower average price most of the time. Now, interestingly enough, in the last video, I had identified 12.5 cents as a price that I thought was a WTF price. We were unlikely to get it, but that did happen because we ended up below 12.5 cents. In fact, we're below 12.5 cents right now. And when we look at the overall picture, if we look in terms of Bitcoin, we're still pretty close to where the trend line is. So there's not any great deal to be had. Like we think things are working on track mostly. But with Caspa, we're seeing significant deviations below the trend line. And I did make a separate video on why I think KRC20 has had a particular impact on this. In fact, we can just look at the CAS Bitcoin price over here. And this is the Caspa divided by Bitcoin. And you can see around the 15th of September, we started having this big decrease, right? And that has stabilized somewhat now since about the middle of November, but then continued to go down. But really, it started around the 15th of September. And similarly, if you look at it versus the total crypto, the total altcoin market, we can see sort of the same thing around the 15th of September, what happened. Well, it's basically when KRC 20 fees started getting introduced, and you can check out my list of videos to see how I discuss that. Uh, but for Bitcoin, essentially, we look like we're on track. But for Casper, we have deviated significantly. In the past, we would, now this is the minus 40, 50, and 60% trend line. So in the past, if you look back far in the past for Caspa, you can see that we would most of the time we were bouncing at to this, yeah, orange line, and the worst case was maybe we ended up hitting around this purple line. And really early in history when we went down all the way to the green line. Now the green line is an interesting one because it's a minus 60 trend line, minus 60% trend line, and that is the same sort of stuff that we saw in Bitcoin back in the day, that it would bounce back off the 60% trend line. So, and of course, in earlier on in history, it went below that too, but let's ignore that once we had enough history going forward. So as you can see, if we assume that Caspa will also hold and bounce around this minus 60% trend line, now would be a pretty good time to buy. But of course, as we have previously been following, and subscribers to the channel will know that we were previously looking at the minus 40 and minus 50% trend line as the one that we bounced off. And now, so it feels like, am I shifting the goalposts by ending up going to the minus 60% trend line? And again, we don't know because there isn't a lot of history along with Caspa so far, but we can only use the time and the data that we have. And so I personally even did some analysis on my previous video, which you guys should check out, which I developed a break adjusted trend line. Like, okay, let's assume that on September 15th of this year, there was an increase in supply and that causes a price shift to happen. And so we moved everything down by a particular amount, which I estimated was about 18% or so, due to a 22% increase in price. And because of that, you can see that we are now bouncing around this adjusted minus 50% trend line. And that minus 50% trend line for today's date is around 11.5 cents. And below minus 40% is around 14 cents or so, right? So typically, this has been a pretty good place to be buying. And in the worst possible case, if we take it down to the minus 60% trend line, you're looking at a little bit of 9.5 cents, call it maybe 9.25 cents or so. So really, this is a good time to be buying, in my opinion. And as a result, not only have I deployed that additional capital, which I deployed at 12.5 cents, but I've set up a limit order to deploy everything that is left at around 9.5 cents. And outside of that, I've also decided to increase the daily DCA amount because I think this is going to be a great buying opportunity when we look back in the past, right? So at some point, we know that the altcoin market is going to go through a lot of vacillations up and down. And the reason why I do this work with the power law is because I wanted something more quantitative that allows me to make investment decisions. So when I think that it is a great investment opportunity, I want to increase the amount of resources that I'm putting in there. This is sort of that dynamic DCA. The lower it gets, the more we put in. And of course, the assumption here is that it's going to come back. When we look at the entirety of this data, I think it's pretty clear at this point that the trend line is adjusting. It's very clear from looking at this stuff, what happened in September 15th from the KRC 20 introduction has changed the power law in some sort of sense. This graph is my best ability to think about in a simple way how we can adjust for that increased supply. But of course, there's no guarantees, right? But the lower it goes down, if we assume that it's going to come back, and if this is the ship that we're going to be sinking on, then we want to be putting more resources into it, which is why not only have I got this limit order in at 9.5 cents, but I've also increased that daily DC amount to $200 from $100. And if it goes down below into this minus 60% region over here, even further, I'll consider increasing that. And again, this is not financial advice, but I am just trying to explain to you guys that even though it feels like the worst time to be investing, if you believe that the project is going to be bouncing back, if you believe there was something about Caspa that allowed it to follow the power law so well for such a long period of time, just bounced around this long line for such a long period of time, It may not come back to this exact line because the line itself will dynamically adjust, but it is going to go back to a higher level. And so this would be a good time to try and buy it, right? And so that is my conviction based on my research in the Kaspa and also just looking at the data saying this is a good risk reward ratio, right? If I believe the math, at worst, I think it's going to go down to about 9.5 cents. But in a good situation, it could go back all the way to 23 cents. Or not back all the way, it could go in the range of 23, 25 cents. So the risk reward ratio downside at a current price of, let's say, 9.5 cents, it's call it 12 cents. It goes down by maybe 30%, 25%, but the upside is, 100%, right? Or 150%. That is a good risk reward ratio, in my opinion. And so we have the power law backing that up, and we know that it's going to dynamically adjust because there's new data coming in, and we're finding out what the underlying power law now is out after the introduction of KRC20 and whatever market changes have taken place. But there will be some equilibrium that will come up. And you can think in the worst possible case that what happens if things go to complete hell? What if it Casper were to actually go to zero? Well, if it were to go to zero, let's say it's right now trading at, let's call it just 12 cents. If it goes to zero, you lose 12 cents, but it follows the trend line back, even the break adjusted trend line, you're looking at a value of about 62.5 cents. So your downside is you lose 12 cents. Your upside is that you gain 50 cents. So that's 1 to 4, 1 to 5 sort of payoff, which is a pretty good odd. And I don't think it's going to drop down to zero. I think there's too many people that are invested into it, and it has some really strong technical chops. So we will keep up the DCAing into Kaspa at $200 a day at this point, following this algorithm, the triangle algorithm, which splits it according to the confidence and also the expected return. And we'll see in a little while. Right now, you want to sort of think about is what altcoin or Bitcoin or what investment is going to provide me the best risk to reward ratio. And if you're a believer in the mathematics behind the power law, which is quite simple, then you think there's a pretty good chance, not a 100% chance, because nothing is guaranteed that Kaspa is going to be coming back at a higher level. And if that doesn't fit your risk reward ratio, then you should find some other investment that it does. Again, this is only for informational purposes, and I'm telling you how I am using these mathematics in order to make investment decisions. But everyone is different. You have to figure out your risk reward profile. And perhaps it means that you just want to be investing in Bitcoin. And you've got the mathematics here that say we should have a 40% return, 50% return on Bitcoin over the next year at least, which is a pretty good return by most standards. So maybe that is more your cup of tea. So figure out what dynamic is going to work best for you. And I just wanted to inform you guys this is the way how my strategy is adapting and evolving based on the data that's coming in. So as always, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. Cheers.